I used to be the one left behind now. I'm the one who decides who gets to stay. My name is Caleb Rowan. She left me with nothing but an unread message, a bare apartment, and a silence so complete it made the walls hum. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Ethan's Way. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It was a Thursday. Not that I remember the date, just the details. The way Claire's yellow mug sat in the sink, still stained with her morning espresso. The scent of her shampoo lingering in the bathroom. The white cardigan she always draped over the back of the couch gone. I thought she was just running late for work. I texted, then called, left a voicemail. Nothing dramatic. Just, hey, you left your charger. But as night fell and the key I'd given her didn't turn in the lock, I knew. She wasn't coming back. No fight. No, we need to talk. No note. Not even the dignity of a breakup text. Claire vanished like a pulled thread, and with her, the fabric of who I thought I was. People always talk about heartbreak, like it's loud, crying, shouting, throwing things. But mine was quiet. It curled inward like paper under flame. I didn't rage. I folded. The next morning I went to work like nothing happened, sat at my underpaid analyst desk, nodded through meetings. I'd take lunch alone like usual. No one noticed I was missing a piece. But I noticed. For months afterward, I checked her Instagram in secret. No new posts. Then suddenly she was in Prague, then Madrid, then Singapore. Pictures of sunlit cafes, rooftop bars, and him, the guy. Slick smile, blue suits, always holding her like she was something expensive. I stared at the screen, and all I could think was, did he get a goodbye? Did he even know my name? Before Claire, I already had abandonment stitched into me. My dad walked out when I was 12. My brother went off the grid after getting clean. My mom did her best, but she always looked at me like I reminded her of the ones who left. So I learned early how to play invisible. I thought Claire was different. She noticed things about me other people didn't, how I twirled my pen when I was thinking, how I always reread emails twice before sending. She made me feel like I was finally being seen, until she made me feel like I never mattered at all. That night when I finally accepted she was gone, I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, message unsent. Did I do something wrong? I didn't send it. Not because I didn't want to, but because I already knew the answer wouldn't come. And maybe that's what broke me the most, not that she left, but that she thought I wouldn't question it. Like she always expected me to be the one left behind. And for a while I was. Months passed. I moved to a cheaper apartment, took more shifts. I stopped checking her profile, or at least I told myself I did. Then one day, during a lunch in the break room, my coworker Nina was scrolling through her phone. Oh my God, she said, mouthful of quinoa. Claire Martin just got engaged to Lucien Crane, that guy who does those tech investment TED Talks wild. That name, Claire Martin. I hadn't heard it out loud in over a year, but it hit like a punch in the throat. I leaned over slowly. Nina tilted the screen, and there she was. Same smile, same white cardigan, and standing next to her Lucien, smiling like the world owed him a favor. I felt something twist deep inside me, not jealousy, not even sadness, something colder, calmer. I whispered to myself, you made me invisible. One day I'll be the one who decides who gets to stay. And that was the day I stopped trying to forget her, and started building the version of me she'd never be able to ignore. Over the next year, I studied every book on leadership and psychology I could afford, took night classes in business intelligence, built a portfolio, said yes to grunt work no one wanted, stayed late, made myself valuable in silence. I didn't have connections or pedigree, but I had memory. Pain is a powerful fuel when you let it burn the right way. By the time I got a call from an emerging AI startup for a strategy analyst role, I already knew how I'd answer. Yes, I said, but I want to be in the room when decisions are made, not just write the reports. They gave me the chance. I earned the seat, then I took the table. You might think the story is about heartbreak, but it's not. It's about what happens when the forgotten learn how to choose. When the overlooked learn how to watch and wait and decide. She thought she disappeared, but I was right behind her the whole time. She re-emerged quietly like a ghost that had never really left. I didn't follow Claire online anymore, or at least I pretended I didn't. But that day, I was researching competitors in the VC space, looking at firms that might be circling our product, and her face just appeared. It was a corporate gala photo, not some personal selfie or filtered brunch shot. This was different. This was Claire with her back straight glass of wine in hand, caught mid-laugh like she belonged in that room, like she was someone now. Standing next to her was Lucien Crane again. The same Lucien from the engagement post now labeled as Managing Director Aurelios Capital. That name, that firm, they just funded one of our rivals 6 months ago. I'd been chasing that account with my team for weeks, and there she was, Claire Martin listed as their new talent operations consultant, a role I created for my own department 6 months earlier. She wasn't just living my dream, she was stepping into my blueprint. I leaned back in my chair, the office lights buzzing above me. Everyone else in the room was typing, taking calls in their own world, but my chest felt hollow. I had built this version of myself so carefully, brick by brick, loss by loss, and yet here she was again slipping back into my orbit like she never left. And this time, she wasn't just a footnote, she was competition. For a long time, I stared at that photo, not out of jealousy. I wasn't that man anymore, it was something else. A sense that something unfinished had just been pulled from storage. She'd gone from the girl who ghosted me to the woman who was now stepping into my professional life, publicly, strategically. I closed the browser, I didn't flinch, I didn't rage, I didn't stalk her socials again that night. Instead, I wrote her name on a sticky note, Claire Martin. I placed it on my whiteboard. A simple name under a single word, watch. The startup I worked for had grown fast, too fast. As head of talent and strategy, my job wasn't just to fill roles, it was to protect the culture, shape the direction, and pick people who could build the future we were trying to sell. Most weeks I reviewed 50 to 60 resumes. I never expected one of them would be hers, but it was. 2 months later, it landed in my inbox during a late Friday sort. No message, just a file attached with a name in the header I'd once known better than my own. Claire Martin, applying for a strategic program specialist, the very pipeline position I'd been advocating to open up for people with crossover experience. Her resume was impressive, a bit curated, a bit buzzword heavy, but she'd grown since we last spoke. Her references checked out. She'd worked with real names, coordinated real launches. It wasn't fluff. She was qualified, but she didn't know who was reading it. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from shock, from strategy. This wasn't a personal moment. It was a professional one. The perfect storm. The woman who made me feel disposable was now unknowingly asking to work for me, to be chosen by me, to be evaluated by the very person she once ghosted without a backward glance. I could have rejected her application on the spot, but where's the art in that? The following Monday, I added her to the shortlist. I made sure her screening interview came through me. I drafted the email, "Hi Claire, we were impressed by your background and would love to invite you for a first-round interview. Let me know what times work best." I signed it, Caleb Rowan, Head of Talent and Strategy. No last-minute reveals, no hint of our history. Let her come to me. Let her not recognize me at all, because I wasn't the man she left behind anymore. I was the man who now chose. The day of the interview, I wore the same cologne I used to wear when we dated. Not because I wanted her to smell it, but because I wanted to know whether she would notice. She walked into the conference room like she belonged there. Professional, confident, polished Claire Martin, I said standing. She turned, froze for half a second. Her smile faltered just briefly and then it returned. "Caleb." I nodded. "Long time." She laughed nervously, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Wow, this is unexpected. Life circles back," I replied, gesturing for her to sit, and as she did, I watched her closely. There was something almost thrilling about the discomfort behind her eyes. Like she suddenly realized this wasn't just a job interview, it was something else. The beginning of a reckoning. I asked her the standard questions, let her answer them with ease. I nodded, took notes, gave her just enough rope to feel confident again. But beneath the surface I was watching for cracks, and they were there. Small ones, in her voice when I asked about failure, in the way she hesitated when describing why she left her last position. At the end of the meeting, she stood smoothing out her blouse. "Honestly, Caleb, it's kinda nice seeing you here. You've really made something of yourself." That sentence, like it was a compliment, like I should thank her. "I appreciate that," I said flatly. She walked toward the door. "Oh, and Claire," I added. She turned. "This time I'll be the one calling you." She waited 3 days before replying to the follow-up. Most candidates responded within hours. Claire took her time, probably thought it would seem more confident, calculated, like she still had the upper hand, but I could see the cracks forming already. It was in the way she double-checked every email, every sentence carefully worded to feel breezy but not desperate. Thanks for the interview, Caleb. It was unexpected but oddly refreshing to reconnect after so long. I'd love to hear your thoughts on next steps. Professional, warm, no acknowledgement of what she did to me years ago. No apology, just forward motion. I didn't reply right away, not because I was being cruel, but because I understood something now. People like Claire only appreciate what they have when they feel it slipping, so I gave her time to sit in that silence, the kind I knew all too well. When I finally responded, it was short. We're moving you to the next stage. Expect details from HR. No smiley, no warmth, just business, the kind she made our ending out to be. I watched her sail through the interviews, smooth, charming, brilliant on paper. Our team was impressed. They only saw the polished exterior, the one I once fell for too. But the thing about Claire was that she was always good at beginnings. She never stayed long enough for endings. That was about to change. After her final panel, I met with my CEO, Mara. She trusted me with these decisions, trusted that my picks would carry the culture we built, one that rewarded humility, resilience, awareness. I like her, Mara said, leaning back. She's sharp. Would you back her? I paused. It was the first real moment where I had to make a choice. Not just play a game, not just entertain a twisted little revenge fantasy in my head. I could shut it down, end it now, say she wasn't a good fit and that would be the end of it. But part of me wanted to know how far she'd go, wanted to see who she really was now. I'll take her under my wing, I said. We'll see what she's made of. That night, I stared at her resume again, at the timeline, the names, the projects, and I saw it clear as day. Claire had been chasing the kind of credibility she once said she didn't care about. Titles, big firms, keynotes. She didn't just leave me. She left who I was because I wasn't good enough yet. And now she wanted to sit at my table. I sent her the offer. It was generous, prestigious, but it also placed her directly under my management. Every review, every decision, every bit of growth would run through me. I clicked send. And for a long time, I just stared at the screen. Not because I was nervous, because this was control, this was closure, or so I thought. She accepted within the hour. The email came back with a casual flair, as if we were old friends working together again. Excited to join the team. Looks like life has a sense of humor after all. That line stayed with me. She thought this was a joke, a cosmic wink. She had no idea what she'd walked into. On her first day, I watched her enter the office with that familiar sway, poised, confident, the type of woman who always made people turn their heads. My team welcomed her. I kept my distance, but not too much, just enough to keep her guessing. We had our first one-on-one that afternoon. She sat across from me like we were equals, smiling, relaxed. You've built something incredible here, Caleb, she said, looking around. Honestly, I'm proud of you. There was that word again. Proud. I didn't need her pride. I needed her honesty. How's it feel being back in a startup environment, I asked. She leaned in, like I never should have left. I nodded slowly. Funny. That's exactly what I thought years ago. Her smile faded for just a second, and in that moment I knew she remembered everything. She just didn't know how to say it. Over the next few weeks I gave her space to succeed, but I never made it easy. Her tasks weren't glamorous. Coordination, admin reviews, low-level client research, all things beneath her resume, but nothing she could publicly complain about. I praised others in meetings, gave high-visibility projects to newer hires, while Claire sat perfectly polite waiting for her moment to shine, but it never came. I watched her start to shrink. She stayed late, triple-checked her work, started asking for feedback, and one day in the elevator she finally said, Did I do something to make this awkward, Caleb?" The words hung in the air. I looked at her and said quietly, no more than usual. She flinched, and for the first time since she walked out all those years ago, I saw it. The guilt, real, unfiltered, human. And I'll be honest, it didn't feel triumphant. Not the way I thought it would. It felt like a mirror. Like I was staring into the part of myself that still needed her to feel what I felt, just to make it even. But it wasn't even. It never would be. Still, I wasn't done. Not yet. Because the most powerful part of revenge is making them realize they still want to stay just when you're ready to let them go. If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. There's a particular look people get when they're trying to stay useful. It's subtle, a tilt of the head when they speak, a certain eagerness in their voice, an over-preparedness that wasn't there before. Claire had started to show it. She was trying hard, and to most people in the office she looked like a model employee. On time, responsive, always volunteering to help. But I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her confidence began to fray when her ideas weren't chosen, the way she hesitated before knocking on my office door. She still hadn't asked why I hired her, and I hadn't told her. Because power doesn't announce itself, it watches. I started pushing her little by little, assigned her projects with no clear outcome, vague deliverables, tasks that required coordination with people who didn't answer emails, made her prepare reports that I never read aloud. She was swimming in ambiguity, and I could see it, the confusion, the self-doubt, and yet she kept going. One day after another, forgettable all-hands meetings, she approached me in the hallway. I noticed my last few initiatives weren't included in the deck, she said carefully, just wondering if there's anything I should be doing differently. I looked at her like she'd asked the weather. Nope, everything's fine. Keep going. It was the corporate version of a shrug. She nodded, tried to smile, and walked away. And I stood there thinking this was it. This was what she had done to me, the slow unraveling, the emotional gaslighting that made you question whether anything had ever really mattered in the first place. Now it was her turn. But here's the thing. The more I watched her try to stay relevant, the more I started to feel it. Not pity, not forgiveness, but fatigue. It was like playing a game where you already know the ending, and suddenly it's not fun anymore. 2 weeks later, Mara called me into her office. Claire's asking for more responsibility, she said. Thinks she's ready for a program lead role. I stared at her. She's not, I replied flatly. Mara raised an eyebrow. You sure she's been logging long hours? I've seen her take on extra work without complaining. She's trying too hard, I said. It's not leadership, it's survival. Mara nodded slowly, but didn't push. All right, just keep an eye. We don't want to lose someone who's still got potential. I left the meeting with something new bubbling inside me, a sense that I wasn't just controlling Claire's present. I was shaping her future, and I had to decide how far I wanted to go. That night I stayed late. The office was quiet, just the hum of the lights and the distant clack of someone typing. Claire was still at her desk. She looked up when I walked past. Long day, she asked. I paused. Depends on how you measure it. She smiled faintly. I used to think success was all about speed. Now I'm not so sure. There was something raw in her voice, like she wasn't performing for once. I didn't say anything, just watched her. She waited a beat and added, I know I haven't been your favorite. I'm not asking for special treatment, just a real chance. And for the first time, I saw her clearly. Not the girl who left me, not the ambition or the curated profile or the forced confidence. Just Claire, a woman trying to prove she mattered to someone who already knew she did once. I left without responding. The next morning, I scheduled her for a private feedback session, not with HR, just her and me. When she walked in, she had a notebook ready, nervous but trying not to show it. Let's talk about how you're doing, I said. She sat straighter. Of course. I waited a beat, then said, You're not failing, but you're not standing out either. She blinked. You're competent, diligent, but you don't own anything. You're floating. She nodded slowly. Okay, I can handle that. I leaned forward. Claire, you're operating like someone who's trying to prove they deserve to be here, but that's not what this company rewards. We reward people who already believe it. Her hands tightened on the notebook. And then I said it. When you left without a word all those years ago, it broke me. Silence. Absolute silence. She didn't speak, just stared. I waited weeks thinking maybe you'd explain, maybe you'd care. But you didn't. You left me wondering if I ever really mattered. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes wide. And now you're the one waiting. She looked down at the table. I'm sorry, she whispered. It wasn't dramatic. No tears, just 2 words finally. I wasn't brave enough back then, she said. I thought disappearing would hurt less than explaining. I didn't realize it would follow me. I let the moment sit. Then I said, We're not going to fire you. Her head jerked up. But I'm going to start expecting a version of you that doesn't need someone else's approval. She nodded slowly. I'll find her, she said. And for the first time, I believed her. The apology didn't heal everything, but it changed something. For the first time since Claire walked back into my life, I wasn't acting from anger. I wasn't chasing some poetic justice anymore. The moment I heard her say, "I'm sorry," something inside me softened, not because I forgave her, but because I didn't need her to break anymore. I'd already won. And yet, what I didn't expect not after all this time was what came next. Because as I loosened my grip, Claire began to show up differently. The following week, she submitted a project brief without being asked. It was strategic, thoughtful, and honestly better than anything I'd seen from her since she joined. She didn't come to me looking for praise, just dropped it in my inbox with a one-line message. Thought this might help shape the Q4 roadmap. It did, but I didn't reply. Not immediately. I needed to know if this was a performance or a turning point. Over the next month, she started pulling long overdue weight in cross-functional meetings. She challenged bad assumptions, backed up junior analysts, listened more, postured less. My team noticed. Claire's kind of evolved, Nina said during our debrief. She's not trying so hard anymore. She's just doing the work. I nodded, but I didn't say anything. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes revenge doesn't look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like becoming the version of yourself that they never believed you'd become, and then watching them try to catch up. And Claire, she was catching up, fast. But that's when the real twist came. We were in the middle of finalizing a massive new hiring initiative, something that could reshape the company's future. I had just secured approval from Mara and was preparing to form a subcommittee for implementation. Claire walked into my office one afternoon with that same notebook, same calmness, but a different tone. "Caleb," she said, standing tall. "I want to lead the new talent initiative." I looked at her. "You're not on the list," I said. "I know," she said. "But I've been studying the model running scenarios, talking to the internal teams. I've already mapped out a revised hiring architecture and a mentorship pipeline to speed up onboarding." She slid a folder across my desk, and I swear, for a moment I saw her as someone I'd hire even if I didn't know her. I opened the folder, charts, projections, a full pilot plan with gaps addressed, risks flagged. "This is good," I said. "I know," she replied without arrogance, just certainty. I looked at her for a long moment. "You've changed," I said quietly. She gave a small smile. "No, you just finally see all of me now." That sentence stopped me, because maybe I'd only ever seen her through the lens of what she did to me, not who she became after. And suddenly, I had to ask myself the hardest question of all. If she was no longer the villain, was I still playing the hero? That night, I stayed late again. I stared at her proposal for hours, not because I doubted its quality, but because I doubted what it meant for me to say yes. Would I be giving her a win? Would I be surrendering control? Or would I be proving that I was never just the man she left behind? I was the man who could rise above it. The next morning, I handed her the signed approval memo. "You'll lead the pilot," I said. "You'll report to Mara directly. I'll support from strategy." She blinked. "Really?" "You earned it," I said, and I meant it. But before she could turn to leave, I added, "You know you never really asked why I hired you." She paused. "I assumed it was professional," she said softly. "It wasn't?" I replied. "At first it was personal. Very." She met my eyes. No fear now. Just quiet acceptance. "I figured," she said. "I'm still glad you did." As she walked out of my office, something lifted. Not just from her. From me. The ghost of what she did. The bitterness I'd carried. The narrative I'd built where she was the storm and I was just debris trying to hold form. It was gone. And what was left, a man who could choose not just who got to stay, but who he wanted to become. The office felt different after that. Not because anything had tangibly changed. The walls were still white. The chairs still stiff. The coffee still weak, but because I wasn't bracing for Claire anymore. I wasn't strategizing ways to hold her back or put her in her place. I had already done it, and more importantly, I'd let it go. But here's the thing, when you release control, life has a strange way of giving it back. Claire thrived. The hiring initiative she led turned heads internally and beyond. In just a few weeks, she reduced onboarding time by 30%, launched a mentorship circle, and negotiated a partnership with a top-tier university for talent referrals. People were talking about her. Mara, HR, the execs. Some were even whispering her name in succession planning meetings. But none of that bothered me anymore. because somewhere in the process I had stopped seeing Claire as a symbol of my past and started seeing her as a mirror of my growth. Still, I kept my distance. We interacted when necessary, brief, efficient, clean. I didn't overstep, neither did she. But one Friday, she knocked on my door, a rare, nervous energy about her. "Got a minute?" she asked. I nodded. She stepped in, shut the door behind her, and stood awkwardly before speaking. "I've been offered a role," she said, "somewhere else." I didn't flinch. "We're Aurelio's capital," she said. "Of course. Lucien's firm." It hit me harder than I expected. I leaned back in my chair. "What's the role, head of people and ops?" she replied. "Double the pay, executive track, and I'd report directly to the board." I raised my eyebrows. "That's a big move." She nodded. "I haven't said yes." There was silence between us. Not tension, just wait. "Why are you telling me?" I asked. She looked at me, eyes clear. "Because you changed how I see myself. Because I was wrong about you. And because I don't want to leave without saying goodbye. Again." That sentence landed in my chest like a slow burn. Not because it hurt, but because it healed something I didn't even realize was still bruised. I stood up, walked around the desk, and faced her. "You don't owe me anything, Claire," I said. "You earned your way back. You stayed, you rose, and now you're ready for more." She blinked, a little surprised by the warmth in my voice. "Will you be okay if I go?" she asked, and for a second I saw her not as the woman who left, but the one who grew beside me. I smiled just a little. "Claire, I said I was okay long before you walked back through that door. But thank you for giving me the chance to prove it to myself." She stepped forward and held out her hand. I took it, no lingering, no what-ifs, just mutual recognition. Two people who were once broken, now whole and separate. As she walked out for the last time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. Because this time it wasn't her leaving me. It was both of us choosing to move forward finally on our own terms. The Monday after Claire left the office felt sharper, not colder, just clearer, like someone had turned down the noise and left only the essentials behind. Her absence wasn't a hole, it was a clean break, like tearing off a bandage and finding smooth skin underneath. No one asked about her right away. The team kept moving, product sprints, planning decks, investor calls. Startups don't pause for personal goodbyes, but in subtle ways I felt it. The chair she always adjusted 3 times before sitting in, the whiteboard marker she preferred, her post-its always squarely aligned like tiny soldiers. Gone. And I didn't miss her, not the way I thought I would. One afternoon, Mara pulled me aside. "You good?" she asked, leaning against my office door with a mug of green tea in hand. "Never better," I said, and it was true. She studied me. "You know, when Claire first joined, I wasn't sure if you were protecting her or setting her up." I smirked. "Sometimes it was both." She smiled faintly. "Whatever it was, it worked. She left stronger than she came in." I nodded, "And so did you." That night I stayed late, not out of habit but reflection. I opened the drawer where I'd kept Claire's resume, now paper-clipped and archived in a file I didn't need anymore. I stared at the name, Claire Martin, not a villain, not a warning, just a name. I shredded it, and in that sound, the paper crackling, splitting, fading, I felt something powerful settle in my chest. Not victory, peace. Weeks passed. I led 2 new hires, reshaped the onboarding plan, and quietly transitioned into a senior role with more strategy oversight. My reputation in the industry was growing, not loud or viral, but steady. Quiet power. Then one evening, I got an email. No subject line, just 2 lines of text. "I'm still growing. Thought you'd want to know. Claire." No attachment, no link, no follow-up. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't need to. She was never supposed to stay forever. She was just a chapter. And now I was writing my own ending. Later that night, I stepped out onto my apartment balcony, one of the few luxuries I allowed myself. The city glowed below a map of lights and silence. I thought back to the guy I used to be, the one she left sitting in a too small apartment, staring at a phone that wouldn't buzz. And I thought about who I was now. Not just someone who'd been hurt, someone who'd rebuilt. And now someone who decided who mattered, who stayed, and who didn't. That's the real power, isn't it? Not in getting even, but in realizing you don't need to anymore. Because when you stop chasing closure, you become it. A few months after Claire left, I noticed something interesting. The people who used to orbit around her started to come closer to me, not because I asked them to, but because real leadership has a gravitational pull when it stops trying to prove itself. Before I used to speak to be heard. Now I speak to be understood, and only when it's needed. I started noticing who stayed late without needing applause, who asked questions for clarity instead of ego, who owned their mistakes like badges instead of burying them. And in that quiet, something began to rise. A new culture. One that didn't revolve around spectacle or the sharp-edged hustle Claire once embodied. Instead, it revolved around steadiness, ownership, purpose. One day, during a team stand-up, Nina raised her hand and said, "Hey Caleb, I've been thinking we should start grooming a few folks for internal promotions earlier, not just when gaps open up. Create a proactive track, maybe." I looked at her for a moment, proud. It was an idea Claire would have loved. And instead of taking the credit or deflecting, I said, "That's a strong idea. Let's build it. Simple, direct, empowering." We called it the Stay Track. The irony of the name wasn't lost on me. That quarter we onboarded 4 new team members, all of them selected not just for their skills, but for their potential to grow into something bigger than their resumes suggested. That's something Claire had taught me even unintentionally. Paper is cheap, proof is earned. We ran quiet mentorships, rotated leads, gave junior folks real ownership, not just shadow work. And in return, they showed up hungry, capable, loyal. At a company-wide meeting, Mara highlighted our team as the highest performing division by impact per employee. "You're building something different, Caleb," she told me later. "Not fast and flashy, but deep, durable." And I realized I was no longer chasing respect. I was cultivating it. But with growth came exposure, and with exposure came offers. That's when the headhunter came calling. "Hey Caleb, I'm working with a firm that's scaling fast. They're looking for someone to build culture from the ground up. C-suite level. Your name's been mentioned a lot." I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking up to people. They were looking for me. Later that week, I took a walk through the park near my apartment. The same one I used to jog through when Claire had first left me headphones in pain, stuffed under running shoes, each step a punch to the ground. I sat on a bench now, slower, older, clearer. 2 teens were arguing over whether to ghost someone or just be straight about it. I almost laughed. It was such a small thing, but it hit me. People talk about love as the thing that defines you, but often it's the exit that carves deeper, who leaves you, how they leave you, and whether you let that define your future. Claire left me without closure, and for a long time I thought that meant I couldn't move on until I got it. But now I knew something else. You don't need the ending to write the next chapter. You just need to stop rereading the old one. Back at the office, I found an envelope on my desk. No logo, no markings, just my name. I opened it slowly. Inside was a folded note and a plane ticket. A one-way flight to Prague. First class. The note read, "You once said Prague was your dream city. I never forgot. You were right about everything. Thank you for giving me space to become someone better. Claire." I sat still for a long moment. She remembered. After everything, she still remembered that one conversation, the one where I said I'd always wanted to walk Charles Bridge alone at dawn, watch the mist rise off the Vltava, feel the city breathe before anyone else did. I never got that trip. I gave it up when she left. I needed the money, needed to stay put, needed to survive. But now, years later, she gave it back to me, not as an apology, but as an acknowledgement. She knew, and maybe that's all I ever wanted from her. To know she remembered the man she left and respected the man he became. I didn't take the flight, but I kept the ticket, because some gifts aren't meant to be used. They're meant to remind you of how far you've come. A few nights later, I stood again on my balcony. The city didn't look smaller, but I felt bigger, not louder, just more solid. And I said something out loud just to myself. She didn't break me. She shaped me. That was the truth, and that truth, it was mine to keep. It's funny how clarity often arrives in the quiet, not with a bang or some big epiphany, but during the small in-between moments, like when you're brushing your teeth and catch yourself smiling in the mirror without realizing why, or when someone compliments you and it actually lands not like armor deflecting, but like water soaking in. I had more of those moments lately, small confirmations that I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living on my terms. One morning, I arrived at the office early, too early for anyone else. I liked it that way now. The stillness, the soft hum of computers warming up, the echo of my footsteps in the empty hallway. I brewed a cup of coffee and sat down at my desk, flipping through performance reviews and promotion recommendations for the next quarter. There it was again, this feeling. Not pride exactly, not peace, something quieter, deeper, authority without insecurity. And that was when I knew I didn't need to make anyone feel small anymore to feel tall myself. Later that day, Mara and I sat down to review succession planning. "Let's talk about Nina," she said. "You've been mentoring her closely, right?" "Yeah," I replied. "She's ready for the next step. Director level." Mara nodded. "You're not worried she'll leave once she gets it?" I smiled. "If she leaves, it means we built her well. That's the point." Mara leaned back and looked at me for a long moment. "You've changed, Caleb." I laughed. "I get that a lot lately." "No, I mean it," she said. "A year ago, you were still managing like you had something to prove. Now you're building legacy." That word, legacy, it stuck, because for the first time, I believed I might actually leave something behind, and not because I chased revenge, but because I nurtured something better in its place. That weekend, I visited my mother. She'd always been hard to impress, not cruel, just tired, worn thin by years of disappointment from other men in her life. I didn't blame her, but growing up in that shadow made it hard for me to believe I could be someone worth staying for. She noticed the change in me before I said a word. "You've got something in your face," she said while pouring tea. "Stillness, maybe, or fire." "Both, maybe," I replied. She nodded, lips thin but approving. "You look like a man who knows who he is." And for the first time, I didn't flinch. A few days later, I received another email. This one wasn't from Claire. It was from Lucien. Yes, that Lucien, the one Claire had left me for years ago. He was stepping down from Aurelio's capital. Something about family new ventures scaling back. But the email wasn't about that. It was a referral. To me. He was recommending me as a candidate to fill his shoes interim managing partner. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I was shocked, but because it was full circle. The man who once had everything I wanted, the title, the power, the woman, was now passing the baton to me. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I closed the laptop and stepped out of the office. Walked down the street to a little cafe I liked, one that Claire and I used to visit years ago. They hadn't changed the decor. Still had those mismatched chairs, chalkboard menu, the scent of cinnamon in the air. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window. No phone, no laptop, just me in the moment. And I thought about what this all meant. Taking Lucien's position wouldn't just be a promotion. It would be the very seat of power that once felt like a distant mountaintop. The one I was left behind from. But here I was, with the invitation in my inbox. And suddenly I realized it wasn't about proving I belonged anymore. It was about choosing whether I wanted to be there at all. I went back to my apartment that night and opened the ticket Claire had sent me again. Still unused, still pristine. I didn't need to fly to Prague to feel like I'd arrived. I already had. I eventually replied to Lucien, "Appreciate the consideration. Let's talk." But I wasn't rushing. I wasn't desperate, because when you're no longer chasing the people who left you, you finally get to chase something else, the version of yourself who stays. That's the real win, isn't it? Not the corner office, not the pay bump, not the title. It's walking into a room full of people who once overlooked you, and realizing you don't need their permission anymore, because you're not standing in their shadow. You're casting your own. I sat across from Lucien Crane in a private boardroom lined with frosted glass. A skyline sprawled behind him, distant, polished, unreachable once. Now it felt almost small. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him, though truth be told, I'd never actually met him face to face until this moment. Just through screens, headlines, Claire's filtered photos from rooftop parties. Now we were breathing the same air. Lucien leaned back casually, professional, confident but not arrogant. That kind of permanent ease that comes from being used to saying no and people still smiling afterward. "I'll be straight with you," he began. "The board's nervous. They're used to seeing older blood in this chair. Ivy ties, silver hair. And you recommended me anyway," I said. Lucien smiled. "That's how we keep winning. We stop pretending the past knows the future." I didn't respond. I just watched him. He continued. "Claire spoke highly of you, by the way." I raised an eyebrow. "She'd tell you everything she didn't have to," he said, but I got the sense there was history. She left me without a word, I said flatly. Lucienne blinked. And now she recommends you to replace me. I smiled faintly. Life's funny like that. The meeting went on for another hour. Logistics, compensation, expectations. But beneath it all, I felt something deeper. This wasn't just a handoff. This was a reckoning with every part of my story being left behind, made invisible, treated like an option. And now I was the one choosing, not just where I stood, but where I went next. That evening, I didn't call anyone. No celebration, no victory lap. I went home, opened a beer, sat on my balcony again. My city still glowed, still breathed, still moved forward, with or without me. And I thought about a single question. Do I want this? Or do I just want to prove that I could have had it? There's a difference, a sharp one. The first gives you peace. The second traps you in a loop. The next morning, I walked into the office like I always did, said good morning, smiled at Nina, gave feedback to new hires, responded to emails without delay. No one knew that I had a life-changing offer sitting in my inbox, and I didn't want them to know not yet, because before I made any decisions, I had to revisit the one thing I'd avoided for years. Why did being left behind matter so much to me? It wasn't just Claire. It was my father, my brother, the friends who drifted after high school, the mentors who promised to vouch for me and vanished, and maybe, just maybe, I'd been collecting those abandonments like debt, waiting for the day I could make the whole world pay it back. But now I was tired of the accounting. That afternoon, I called my mother. She didn't pick up right away. I left a voicemail. Hey Mom, I've got some news, good news. Might take a new job, a big one. Just wanted to hear your voice. No pressure. Call when you can. She called back that night. You gonna move? She asked. No preamble. Maybe, I said. You always did dream bigger than this town, she replied. Then a pause. You remember when you were 16 and your father didn't show up to your science fair? Yeah, I said, voice tightening. You stood there all night waiting, she said softly. Didn't cry, just held that folder like it would earn his love. I didn't speak. I saw it, she continued. That day I knew you were never going to beg for someone to choose you again. Maybe that's what this was always about, not revenge, not power, but the end of waiting. I walked into Mara's office 2 days later. I'm stepping down, I said. She looked up slowly. The Lucienne thing, I nodded. She studied me, then nodded once. No protest, no manipulation, just understanding. You're ready, she said. I exhaled. Yeah, I am. We shook hands, not as boss and employee, as equals. The last day at the company wasn't emotional. It was clean, honest, a few handshakes, a short speech, and then it was done. I packed my things into a single box, no fanfare. On the way out, Nina hugged me. You're the best boss I ever had, she said. You'll be better, I replied, and that's the whole point. I didn't go straight home. I walked, miles, past streets I used to get lost in, past restaurants Claire and I used to split checks at, past corners where I'd waited for buses in the rain, praying I wouldn't be late and lose another shift. And I ended up somewhere I hadn't been in years, the rooftop of the old parking garage across from my first apartment. I climbed the stairs, stood at the edge, let the wind hit my face, and I whispered something I didn't know I needed to say. You were never the problem. You were just becoming. We all get left behind, by lovers, by friends, by versions of ourselves. But one day, if we're lucky, we stop chasing people and start choosing who gets to stay. My first day at Aurelio's didn't feel like a coronation. It felt like walking into a house that looked polished on the outside, but hummed with the faint sound of something breaking behind the walls. Power, I've learned, isn't loud. It's quiet, subtle, often lonely. The title on the door now said Managing Partner. The assistant had already stocked my desk with customized stationery, and the company card was ready for use. But the truth? None of it felt real until I sat in that chair and faced my reflection in the black glass of the office window. I didn't feel imposter syndrome. I felt haunted, not by failure, but by the version of me that once thought this was everything. My first few weeks were a blur of board meetings, strategy audits, and handover conversations with Lucian. He moved with a kind of careless grace, as if success had always come with a concierge. But I listened closely, took notes, not about the job, about the people. People are the culture, and culture is the shadow of leadership. That shadow had been Lucian's for a long time. Now it was mine. A few days into the role, I received an invitation. No name, just an address. A time. I almost declined, but something in me, curiosity, nostalgia, whatever, nudged me to go. The place was a quiet rooftop bar in the financial district, high enough to watch the world from above, quiet enough to hear yourself think. Claire was already there. She stood in a simple black blazer holding a glass of red wine. She didn't look surprised to see me. "Congratulations," she said. I nodded. "Didn't expect this." "I didn't invite you to reminisce," she said. "I wanted to say something, one thing, and then you can leave if you want." I said nothing. She took a sip of wine, then looked me in the eyes. "I left you because I didn't know how to carry someone else's potential when I was drowning in the weight of my own," she said. "And I hated you for reminding me of everything I was running from." That silence again. She continued, "But I came back because I wanted to see who you became. And I'm glad I did." I didn't interrupt. I let her finish. "I don't want anything from you," she said. "Not friendship, not closure, just truth." I looked at her, really looked at her. She was different, not softer, just clearer. And I realized for the first time she wasn't the ghost I'd been chasing. She was just another person trying to make sense of her past, like me. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "I don't love you either." She nodded slowly. "That's fair. But I'm grateful," I added. "You broke something in me, and I rebuilt it better." Her lip twitched. "I did too." We didn't hug, didn't exchange numbers. We just stood there for a second longer than necessary. Then I left, and I didn't look back. That night I sat in my apartment, the new one, bigger, sleek, minimalist, and I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a blank journal and wrote, "Today I stopped measuring my worth by who walked away. Today I started measuring it by what I've chosen to stay with, myself, my values, my future." Weeks passed. Aurelios began to feel less foreign. I started shaping systems, mentoring associates, rethinking how we valued leadership potential. I created space for people who reminded me of who I used to be, hungry, invisible, underestimated. One afternoon, I overheard two junior partners talking in the hallway. "Rowan's not what I expected." "Yeah, thought he'd be colder." "No, he just makes you feel like he sees everything and won't say a word until it matters." I smiled to myself. That's who I was now. Then, unexpectedly, I received a package. No name, no return address. Inside a book of poetry, no note. But inside the front cover was one underlined line. "We do not heal the same way we break, but we do heal." I don't know if it was from Claire. Maybe it doesn't matter. What mattered was that it resonated. At a leadership retreat a month later, I stood before a room full of CEOs, investors, and venture scouts. And when they asked me what had shaped my leadership style, I said, "This being left behind taught me how to listen to people no one else hears." Silence, then applause. But it wasn't the clapping that mattered, it was the knowing that I didn't get here by stepping over people. I got here by surviving the silence and learning how to speak from it. It's been nearly a year since I stepped into the role that once lived only in the corners of my ambition. Managing partner. It still sounds strange when I say it out loud. Not because I don't believe I deserve it, but because I remember the boy who sat in silence checking his phone for a message that never came. I remember the man who once mistook absence for a verdict, who thought being left behind meant he wasn't enough. But now I understand. Sometimes being left behind is exactly what you need, not to become less, but to become more. I walk differently now, not with swagger, but with certainty. I speak less, but when I do, I mean every word. There's no need to raise my voice anymore. When you've mastered your silence, people listen to your calm. Last week I returned to my old office, the one from before the promotion, before Aurelios. Mara had invited me to speak to the new cohort. A few familiar faces, mostly new ones, bright eyes, sharp questions. Some of them probably Googled me beforehand, others not yet impressed. That's okay. I didn't come to impress, I came to tell the truth. I stood at the front of the conference room and said I used to be the one left behind. By people, by opportunities, even by my own confidence. They leaned in unsure where this was going. And now I continued. I'm the one who decides who gets to stay. Pause. But here's the twist. The power isn't in choosing who stays in your life. It's in choosing what part of yourself you won't abandon anymore. Silence. The kind that says, this is different. After the talk, a young guy named Malik came up to me. Sir, he said, nervous. Can I ask, how did you know when you'd really moved on from what happened? From her, I smiled, because I knew exactly what he meant. You'll know, I said, when her name doesn't taste like a question anymore. He blinked. What does it taste like now? I shrugged. Like a memory, one I respect, but don't revisit. That night, I sat in the quiet again. My apartment, same balcony, same skyline, different heart. I pulled out that old plane ticket to Prague, the one Claire sent. It was still unredeemed, untouched, but I'd kept it for a reason. Not because I planned to use it, but because it reminded me of the moment when someone who once erased me finally saw me. That kind of moment doesn't demand a reunion. It just asks you to breathe easier. And I did. Then I did something unexpected. I booked a new flight not to Prague, to Kyoto, a place I'd always dreamed of going but never told anyone about, a place that belonged to me alone. Because healing isn't about getting back what you lost. It's about building something new with your own hands, your own pace, your own rhythm. So here's what I'll leave you with. Maybe someone walked out on you. Maybe you were overlooked, underestimated, forgotten. Maybe you've lived your life waiting for someone to come back and say I was wrong. But you don't need their apology to evolve. You don't need their permission to move on. What you need is to choose who stays in your story, to choose who you become when the silence is deafening, to choose yourself fully, fiercely, quietly. And if one day someone from your past sees what you've become, let them witness the version of you they never stayed long enough to know. But don't shrink and don't chase, because you're not the one left behind anymore. You're the one who decides. If this story spoke to something inside, you share it in the comments. Subscribe to Ethan's Way for more stories like this where pain becomes power and the quiet ones finally speak. And if you've ever been left behind, this is your reminder you're still here. And that means you still get to choose.